Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Our focus today is going to be on water and polarity. Now, we all know water is absolutely essential for life. People tell you you need to drink 8 glasses of water a day. Make sure you're fully hydrated. And that's because water is very, very important to life. And we're going to look at what specific chemical properties water has that makes it so unique and so special in order for life to be able to, well, live. Hopefully by the end of this video you understand that water has very unique properties due to the fact that it is polar. And we'll talk about what that means here in just a few moments. You should also be able to explain the concept of polarity in molecules and evaluate the importance of water for life. Again, water is very, very important for living things in order to be able to survive. So here's some key vocabulary for our water and polarity video here. Some you may have heard of, some you may have never heard before. But just make sure you understand these are the key terms you should be looking for when you're watching this video. Now, as we've talked about before, water is absolutely essential for life. It is known as the universal solvent, which means it dissolves a lot of things and allows different materials to be carried throughout our body. When we become dehydrated, we get a headache, we feel sick, we can't function, and if we're extremely dehydrated, we can overheat and potentially even die. Now, water has those special properties because it is polar. Now, polar molecules have an unequal distribution of electrons. So if we take a look at the Lewis structure on the right-hand side here, each of those dots represents an electron. If you notice, most of the electrons are towards the bottom part of the water molecule, closer to the oxygen. The hydrogens have very few electrons attached to them towards the upper part. Well, as we all know, electrons are negative. So here we would say that the oxygen has more of a negative charge because it has more of those electrons attached to it. On the hydrogens, we would say that those are slightly positive because there are fewer electrons towards the hydrogen end. The fact that there's a little bit of a positive and a little bit of a negative on this water molecule, that's what makes it polar. If the distribution of electrons were even, then there wouldn't be a negative or positive side to the water molecule. But because there are more electrons closer to the oxygen than the hydrogen, we would say that the oxygen has more of a negative charge and the hydrogen has more of a positive charge. Now, if we take a look at this, because of those properties, it can form what are called hydrogen bonds with other water molecules. So look at the diagram. The slight negative part of the oxygen is attracted to the slightly positive part of the hydrogen. And as we all know, positive and negative attract one another. So there are these special bonds called hydrogen bonds that form between the oxygen and the hydrogen of separate water molecules. This is what gives water a lot of its unique properties because these molecules tend to attract to one another, so they tend to stick to one another. This is the reason why you can put water droplets on a penny and not have it fall over, or the reason why ice expands when it's frozen, or why when you put water into a graduated cylinder, you get what's called a meniscus. It's kind of that little dip in the graduated cylinder. We'll look at all of these things here in just a few moments. Now again, those hydrogen bonds are known as intermolecular forces because they're in between different water molecules. So the red dotted lines there are hydrogen bonds because they are in between separate water molecules. Don't get that confused with covalent and ionic bonds because those are intramolecular forces. Intra means within. So those covalent and ionic bonds exist within the same molecule. Intermolecular forces are between two different molecules. Remember the word inter, think of it like an interstate. An interstate runs between, Interstate 74 runs from Ohio through Indiana and into Illinois. It runs in between different states. Intermolecular forces are in between different molecules. So that root is very important to understand. So make sure you understand the difference between intermolecular forces and intramolecular forces. Keep in mind that water has those unique properties due to hydrogen bonding. That allows water to exhibit adhesive and cohesive properties. Now, adhesive properties mean that the water molecules tend to stick to other things. They tend to stick to the sides of things. That's why, droplets can run down a windscreen, or like I mentioned before, if you put water into a graduated cylinder, the water actually tends to curl up the sides a little bit. Cohesive means that water tends to stick to one another. That's why rain falls in droplets and not just individual molecules of rain. They fall in droplets because those water molecules are attracted to one another, and therefore they kind of stick to one another. And that's kind of what you can see with the penny down below as well. Those water molecules are sticking to each other, which keeps the water on the penny and doesn't just allow it to fall off. The surface tension is kind of a force that pushes up on the water due to the water molecules wanting to stick together. That's why the bugs can sit on top of it and not sink to the bottom, because they don't break that surface tension. The amount of force that they put on the water is less than the water pushing up on the bug, so the bug does not sink in the water. Surface tension is also the reason why, again, you can get that curve on when you put drops of water on a penny. And it's also why you can fill up a glass slightly above the rim, is because the amount of force pushing that water out does not break the surface tension. So the surface tension is a very interesting and unique property when it comes to water, and it all has to do with the fact that water is polar. Now, all molecules have to enter cells by being dissolved in water, and that's what makes water so unique, is because most things on Earth, most molecules are polar. And so what you'll find is that like molecules dissolve other molecules. So if something's polar, it will dissolve something that is polar, and nonpolar will dissolve nonpolar. Another example would be like oil and water. Oil and water don't mix because water is polar and oil is nonpolar. So they're not going to mix with one another. So when we look at solutions, we have two parts of it. We have a solute, which is what's dissolved, a solvent, which is what it's dissolved in, again, usually water, and a solution, which is solute plus the solvent. So if you think about Kool-Aid as an example, if you're making Kool-Aid at home, the solute would be the Kool-Aid powder and the sugar. The solvent would be water, and the solution then would be your final Kool-Aid solution. And you see here on the right, you've got your solute that's dunked into the solvent. Eventually, the solute dissolves in the solvent, creating a solution. So we're going to keep in mind that life depends on water. Water is polar, and that gives it the ability to hydrogen bond and have unique properties. And as a result, most materials must be in solution form to be usable by cells in the body. So most of the things that we take in are polar, and therefore will dissolve in water because water is polar. Now, I will say this until I'm blue in the face, and this is your question for the day. I want you to just write down the statement. I want you to write the statement down 3 times. Water is polar. Water is polar. Water is polar. It's so important concept. It's one of those things that I want to make sure that you leave class with this year. Know that water is polar, and that's what gives it its unique properties in order to be able to sustain this amazing thing called life. So hopefully you understand a little bit more about the objectives that we had in this video. You understand what polarity is, how that applies to water molecules, and the importance of water. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.